Hello and welcome to the Excel video on making histograms. So now we want to take the frequency table that we already had and turn it into an actual graph. I'm going to use the frequency values for the histogram, and then in another video I'll show you a pie chart where we use relative frequency. You could use either one for our histogram, so if you want to make a histogram with relative frequency, go ahead. We're going to start by clicking on the Insert tab, the top ribbon, and under here there are different charts that we can make. Click the first one. It's the bar or column graph. We want two-dimensional, clustered columns, straightforward first option. Okay. For some of you, Excel will anticipate what you want to graph and it'll put some data in here already. Double check that it's actually the data that you want. Since mine doesn't have any data in it, I have to add some. So I double-clicked inside this blank circle. So I'm going up to the Chart Design ribbon and clicking Select Data. Under Select Data, we'll do legend entries first. Legend entries are really the Y values or the vertical values. Legend entries are the frequency or the relative frequency. So I'm going to call this frequency of cola weight. Under series value, it pre-populates a 1 just so the graph has something there. We're going to get rid of all of that though, so delete everything under series values. Then go over to your frequency column and highlight all of those frequencies. You'll see you've got all of these bars with different heights corresponding to a frequency of 3, so this is a height of 3, a height of 4, and so on. Click OK. The default on this is to put 1 through 7, or 1 through however many columns you have, on the horizontal axis. Those numbers don't mean anything though. What we want to do instead is put in something meaningful. So we're going to put in bins. The actual bins, remember this bin of 0.783, that was all of the data values that were 0.783 or below, but greater than 0.780. So that gives us a good idea of what is going on with our data. So they make pretty good labels for the columns. All right, so I'm going to click OK. This looks lovely so far. I've got my histogram with bars, but of course we read in our book that in the histogram the bars are always touching. If you right-click on this, you can click Format Data Series. Over on the right, something pops up with gap width. Just go ahead and take that gap width to 0. Okay. Now my graph has all of these solid blue lines. If you don't really like how they look, you can play around with what's going up top, right? So we could have bars that are coded differently, right? And in either case, we need to let the gap width go to 0 again. So that's looking more like a histogram that we saw in the textbook. In addition to numerical labels, we need descriptive axes labels telling me what these numbers even mean. We can get that by clicking on the plus sign at the upper right corner where it says Chart Elements. I want to click on Axis Titles. Right now you can see the Y-axis title is clicked. So while I'm in here, I can type a new title. This will be Frequency. On the horizontal axis, we also want to type in titles. Even though these numbers do represent the bins, do not put the word bins as your title. Someone who comes along and doesn't know Excel doesn't know what bins means. You want this title to be descriptive of the data, and the data is weight in pounds for cola. So I'm going to say weight in pounds. Oh, except I don't know how to spell. There we go. Really, this is all there is to making a histogram. Frequency on one side, weight in pounds at the bottom, and then we've got our values here. Another little trick we could use is making categories for these labels instead of just the actual bins. All right, to do that, I'm going to start with our bin list here. Just copy it, scroll down and paste it here. Okay. I call this categories. You could also call it ranges. Remember I said this 0.783, this is all the data that is 0.783 pounds and below, but greater than 0.78 pounds. So really this would be from 0.781 up through 0.783. This next one would be 0.7784 through 0.786. If we go and do that for all of them, it will look like this. Notice I didn't write anything for the first bin yet. That's because I don't really know how far down this goes, right? Because it doesn't have a bin before it. One quick trick to go from this bin to the next to this bin, remember we added 0.003. That was in a previous video. If I subtract the bin width, 0.003 was the bin width. If I subtract the bin width from my minimum value, I get 0.774. Right? So that means that this category would go from 0.774 up through 0.777. Now, if I make my actual histogram, it will look very similar. So let's make a new histogram real quickly. Go to Insert, Chart, Two-Dimensional. Right? From here, double-click on the white, click on Select Data. For my legend entries, those are still the frequency values. So I'm going to scroll up and highlight the frequency values. Click OK. And now for this horizontal, I'm going to edit, scroll down, and just hit the categories instead of what we had before. Okay. All right. After we format this, give everything prettified, it will look like something like this. Now you can play around with your options on all of these. If you don't like these values being diagonal, you can right-click on some values, format axis, play around with stuff so it'll show up a little bit better. However you want to do it. I'm fine with you guys having it diagonally like this. So that is histograms. You can of course play around with more of the options to see what other things can come up when you're making histograms. If you have questions, post them to the discussion boards.